Welcome to Rogue Trader. Please read the disclaimer and remember that prices can go down as well as up. Avast make antivirus software, and I consider them a corona pick because they should be very unaffected by the actual lockdown situation, and then subsequently they should be relatively okay if there's any subsequent economic downturn. Avast are headquartered in Prague in the Czech Republic. Their main products are these AVG and Avast antivirus software packages, which everyone has, or everyone I know has, the free versions of on their computers, and they're very good antivirus programs. And this actually gives them, through giving away their virus protection for free, 435 million users worldwide, which is actually a 35% market share. So how they operate is they've got a vast number of computers around the world hosting their software, and this enables them to act as real-time antivirus global network, and then they get their money from where particular individuals upgrade for better protection and some of their other products. And because they've got this massive network, this actually gives them a bit of a competitive advantage. And so in this world where there's increasing threats from having your computer hacked, and where everyone is totally addicted to using computers, this does seem to put them in a good position as a company. The other products that they sell are, obviously, VPN is a big thing now, to hide your online activity and protect your data and location. Then they have just more premium antivirus, and then something more recent is their Family Shield product, which I quite like the sound of, because it means that you protect all of the Internet of Things devices in your house. And also, if you've got like a family, an 8-year-old and some 11-year-olds, then you can actually have their mobile phones set up with safe places on it, and it tracks the location of your children and then lets you know if they're somewhere they shouldn't be. So if they're supposed to be at the nursery, you'll get a warning if all of a sudden they're not at the nursery. So I quite like this Family Shield idea. So Avast's revenue is completely dominated with their consumer direct segment, which, as you can see, is 82%. And their other incomes are consumer indirect, and that's where, when you download their software, other companies pay them to get you to try and install their Google Chrome browser, for example. And then also they do target small to medium businesses, but that's only 6%. Now, actually, when I broke into it a bit, the revenue by sector is obviously really the customer direct is the main thing, and the others are pretty, insignificant in comparison. And actually, they're kind of their sales have been very slightly dropping in the other areas, but the customer direct sales have been increasing through to the 2019 financial year. So there's quite an interesting story with Avast, which is that they began in 1988 when this guy Pavel Baldis, he defeated the Vienna virus, which was like one of the first ever massive viruses. And this ended up in the creation of this all-will antivirus company. Now, it's quite nice how this began in the Czech Republic, and it started with these academics. And then if you fast forward to 2009, communism had been beaten in Czechoslovakia. They turned into a more bona fide private company, and they grew to quite a large size. And they actually turned down a takeover offer from McAfee. And in 2009 was a landmark time when they took on this CEO Vincent Steckler. Now, he then took the company through to 2018 as a much larger company, and with very strong fundamentals. They've built up over a long period of time. They've got a really good kind of strategy and a good, really good assets, and having their free software over so many users all over the world. It's quite a compelling business case so far. And then they, however, IPO'd in 2018. And then in 2019, this guy left, which is obviously a bad thing after all that history. And he was replaced by Ondrej Vlek. And I looked into it because obviously it's not so good when that guy goes after so long. But actually, he looks quite credible. They've obviously been mentoring him to take over based on the last few annual reports, and he actually has been at the company since 1995, so he looks okay. So the history of the company obviously began as a listed company in 2018 with the IPO, and then really their share price went up quite considerably, and doubled in fact to over £500. Unfortunately, there was like this big pump up in the markets anywhere around this time, but unfortunately, in the beginning of 2020, they got embroiled in this massive Jumpshot data scandal. So the Jumpshot scandal involved the fact that they'd been collecting user data, so clicks, what websites you visited and everything. And although they had anonymized this data, it is possible to link those browsing habits to an individual, because you have the actual hardwire ID, and then other third parties like Google and Microsoft, for example, could buy the data off Jumpshot, and then because they've got the same unique codes, where someone's for Google or Microsoft, they've actually given their credit card details. You can then link the history from the AVG software to to an individual. To them, it was anonymized, but unfortunately, there is the flaw that you could link it, and so it led to this massive scandal. And you can see that their stock price plummeted, and then we had the Wuhan virus plummet after that. But this bit at the top here was just from the jump shot before the Wuhan virus hit. So this unfortunately does kind of tarnish them a bit. So that's a bit unfortunate. So yeah, so let's then go to the revenue. So I said before that most of their revenue, for 82%, is through customer direct, and of that, a tiny amount is direct to mobile, but most is direct to desktop. And it's dominated by customer direct to desktop, and historically that has been rising. And they've got a big market share. So I think the only question is, though, how bad will the Jumpshot business affect this? And the Jumpshot was producing revenues of only 36 million and a EBITDA of 7 million. So it is kind of a minimal financial effect now that they've sold off that company. But the thing is, what effect will that bad publicity have on their sales, their profit and loss? You can see actually going back from when they were private, really impressive growth in income, really impressive growth in net income and in operating profit. So it all looks good. It's just a shame about this jump shot problem. So I actually got the analyst estimates of what the revenue is going to be, and you can see that the estimates were dropped like 3 months ago to a month ago, which presumably was as a result of the to take it in account of this. So we do have their forward-looking revenues according to the analysts, and yes, and so we do have the forward-looking revenues according to the analysts, which are stepped down, presumably as a result of the jump shots and perhaps a bit of the Wuhan virus. But this is, it's a bit of a tarnish. We're impressed with their performance to date, but it's a bit of a tarnish. When you look at their net income history, it's quite nice to see the widening between their income and expenditure. And then looking at their assets and debt, they really, the only things to pick out are, I noticed that their goodwill is the majority of their assets, and this relies on how much they can charge for the software in the future. So that's something to look out for, is with new competition, or if because of technology it becomes easier to stop viruses, will they be forced to charge less, and will that affect their goodwill and then therefore their assets? Then another thing I noticed was they did have some debt, but this was being paid down. They've been making some good money, net income of over 200 million, and they've used that the last few years to pay down their long-term debt, which I like to see. So looking at their equity, I noticed that it had increased quite considerably in 2018, and obviously we had the IPO, which could explain that, and also a lot of retained earnings. So it looks quite healthy. I noticed quite a few RNS releases around options and stuff, and then I started to look into how many shares do the original co-founders owned, and unfortunately this is for me a bit of a negative. So the original guys who set it up, these guys here, when you look into it, they own between them 36% of the shares. And I'm just a little bit uncomfortable about the guys who were there from the beginning. They might be getting more closer to retirement age. They own 36%, and then they've just made the company public. There's loads of these option giveaways, so the directors get paid what seems to be quite a lot. I mean, you've got like here 5 million here, which is like 5% of the total number of shares. Um, in potential options being doled out. Don't like the look of all these options flying around. However, I couldn't really see anyone selling stocks significantly. So, so overall, I've been very impressed with Avast as a company. Um, we had the problem of Jumpshot, and I noticed that the some of the legacy shareholders hold rather a lot of the stock. Um, so really, I thought it'd be good to try and work out how were their sales affected during the Corona lockdown, and particularly with the jump shot. Now, obviously, it's pretty much impossible to get your hands on that data. But what I did was I went on eBay and looked at eBay listings. This is a very low data set, you know, almost a kind of pathetic attempt, really. But still, it's all I could do from the information available on the internet. So I did it just for what information I could get. And actually, I saw that McAfee sales had increased quite a lot between February and April, whereas Avast had kind of stayed flat. But it does, based on this, at least the Avast sales have, they've stayed flat, which is kind of consistent in what I was looking at them as a Corona pick. But it was interesting that I saw a difference between the McAfee and the Avast. From that data, wouldn't be making me think, they're losing sales, so that's good. So overall, I've been looking at Avast as a defensive Corona pick and a stock unaffected by the lockdown and relatively unaffected afterwards. And it certainly fit that criteria, and its basic structure is a stock I'd like to be into. Having said this, just a couple of negatives I have noticed. I'd makes me feel like I'd rather look for some other stocks which don't have that, which are more perfect. So if I fail to find some other such stocks, then I would buy them kind of early in the current situation we're in now. Obviously, the S&P it went down 35% and then went up, about 30% in only the last few weeks. So it's just crazy situation. So I definitely won't be going in with any Corona picks unless we start going down again, because it's quite possible that I've missed the time to buy Corona picks if the worst time was here in around 24th of March. But if this was one of the best picks that I found after I've looked at a number, then I'd definitely be waiting for the S&P to go down a bit generally, and then if it kind of stayed the same despite all the other stocks going down, or if it went down, then I'd then go in with my Corona picks. But there was a few too many tarnishes for this to be the lead candidate, and I'm going to have to compare it with some others. Now, if I was to buy it, however, things that I identified to keep a track on after I bought it would be that the revenues meet the estimates. The trend that I saw with their really nice, relatively low sales and marketing and general and administrative costs stay low. And then also would keep a lookout on their pricing, that changes in the marketplace don't mean that they can get less money from their assets. And also a plus for them is how they're paying off their loans, and keep an eye on that. And also keeping an eye on those legacy shareholders who hold 41% of the float, and to to make sure that none of them start selling off lots of their stock. So yes, so in summary, I really like them as a company. There was a couple of negative things I saw, which, although it doesn't necessarily make them a bad company to invest in, I want to shop around and see if I can find some more perfect candidates to come in as a Corona pick. And that's my analysis of Avast.